Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mitra's webinar on creating value in a hyperconnected world. My name is Chinti Veerasinghe, and I'm the CEO of Mitra Digital. I have two very interesting individuals joining me today. Firstly, let me introduce Clayton Locke. Clayton is responsible for product development and delivery excellence for IE Digital. IE Digital, which is formerly known as Intelligent Environment Europe Limited, is one of Britain's leading providers of software based in London. It provides front end technology for financial services organizations and their customers. Clayton has over 30 years of experience in software development and consulting, where he has led technical teams in designing and delivering solutions for the financial services and telecommunications sectors. Clayton, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Aisha. Thanks, Chinti. Actually, hello.
Hi.
Nice to be here. Hi.
Also joining me today is one of Mitra's own, Ayesha Ansar, who is one of our solution leaders for Mitra Digital's business. She is a tech enthusiast, passionate about driving innovation to make a difference, building solutions that matter. Ayesha has over a decade of experience in creating customer experience and solutions for record management, BFS, education, telecom, healthcare, retail, and logistics across the US, UK, Europe, and APAC. Really good to have you here, Ayesha.
Thank you, Chinti.
So let me get started by setting a little context. While a majority of the consulting firms may be helping businesses play catch up, we at Mitra see a bigger opportunity to help our clients leapfrog in their digital journey with the opportunities ahead of us. As you see it, connectivity is now a part of our everyday life. From the moment we wake up to the minute we go to sleep, and in fact, even during the sleep, all 7.7 billion of us are connected continuously to an estimated 38 billion devices. Whether it be via our smartwatch or the 5.1 billion unique mobile phones that are around the globe, or a smart car, people are becoming increasingly switched on. So the question really is, are we looking far enough ahead and thinking about what this means to us and to our businesses and to our teams and our society? The convergence market is estimated to be over $100 trillion. What opportunities lie ahead of us? At Mitra, we know that by only thinking about where we want to be tomorrow, we can prompt action we need today. Can you imagine a world where virtual reality will protect our mental health, or we use technology to make policies based on evidence, or precision medicine is for everyone? Digital tech helps maybe even to close the gender gap and wealth gap. If this sounds a little too futuristic, we are closer than you think. Let's take an example of the autonomous flying taxi named the Volocopter. That's already been demonstrated in Dubai and has made manned test flights in Singapore. It's a lot more quieter, cleaner, more sustainable than the helicopter and can be summoned just simply by your smartphone. Coupled with 5G tech, the autonomous version will use 5G to request permissions to land, download flight data, and improve performance and safety. In fact, a cargo version capable of carrying over 200 kilograms over 40 kilometers has already been flown around as a test in Singapore, and it's even staged a medical rescue mission exercise in Germany. So, hyperconnected means everything is talking to every person, person to person, maybe person to machine, machine to machine. And the value of this network really grows exponentially as the number of people or things on it grows. Communication over digital networks can create risks and threats such as cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and more, but it also creates massive opportunities to solve problems that we haven't yet figured out. So the question is, how do we get started? We can all do this through connected APIs. With our experience across multiple sectors, creating tech-enabled customers experiences across BFS, healthcare, telco, retail, or education, we've been able to really nail down our tried and tested formulas for API-led strategies. We focus on the APIs as they are the connecting threads and or the fabric of our digital world. APIs are the um, underlining thread. So the future really is here, and the future is now. So during this webinar, you will hear from of Mitra's ACE framework, as well as how how you can actually really ace your API strategy, and based on how our implementations across the across myriad of industries. But ahead of that, I want to invite Clayton to speak first on the various stages of maturity he sees the market being at. Clayton, over to you.
Thanks, Chinti. Very interesting. Well, yes, let me start and set the scene about the stages of digital transformation and how APIs fit into digital transformation. Give a little context, and then we'll proceed pretty quickly from this kind of scene setting onto the future and what the future holds. But the way we see it is that you can chart different stages of maturity in digital transformation. We've set out 3 different stages that I'll talk about, and to give you some context. But in summary, most businesses have moved from a single online presence of customer self-service that takes data from the back office and presents it out to the customer. And then moving on from there, companies are at a stage where they have integrated back office systems to provide what we would call a unified customer experience using APIs. Finally, the next stage that we'll talk about, the future stage, some industries are there now, some are just moving to it, in digital transformation, is to integrate across enterprises, integrate platforms so that there is a seamless customer journey across enterprises. The APIs are all essential to this evolution of digital transformation. So go to the next slide, please. Right, so digital transformation progresses through these stages, and if we look at stage 1, just going into detail now, we're kind of looking back, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, where the online customer experience, or what was called the system of engagement, is connected to a back office system. Most companies are there now and have self-service functionality that replaces back office functions by and large. But generally the integration, the APIs or the integration is dictated or was dictated by the back office system in stage 1. The online system was a slave in a sense to the system of record, and the customer outcomes from the online customer experience was really limited to the functionality of the back office application. Moving to stage 2 in the next slide. In stage 2, multiple back office systems now are integrated through a platform to an omnichannel customer experience. And in stage 2, you typically see a platform that is managing multiple integrations into the back office systems, some through, let's say, more modern APIs, others maybe through a point-to-point type integration. And in a sense, stage 2 represents probably where many of the businesses are today. Back office systems generally being limited to the back office systems in the enterprise, but integrated data through a platform to provide a more unified customer experience out at the front end. There are now systems of record or back office systems outside the enterprise which are providing standard APIs that can be consumed. So a good example of that is, say, a credit agency, which is providing credit data, and so, or a postcode lookup, So many applications today are integrating third-party systems through an API layer out to the customer experience as well. But by and large, the customer experience is controlled by the single enterprise and their online system. And many of the integrations that are done in an almost bespoke fashion. But when we move to stage 3 and are now looking into the future, what we're seeing is that industries are moving to deliver a seamless customer journey by orchestrating a process across multiple enterprises. The third stage really is to integrate through APIs multiple businesses together to provide the customer outcome. A complex buying process is a good example, and I'll get to that in just a second. But instead of instead of the customer being shifted from one company to the next in silos, in stage 3, the customer and the customer's data is passed along a buying chain. Supply chain is a good example of where, say, stage 3 integration has happened in the past, but supply chain also is different from where stage 3 is in digital transformation, in that supply chain integration across multiple enterprises was typically dictated by the primary player in the supply chain, and all the other businesses had to kind of adhere to that. In stage 3, what we're seeing are APIs that should be standard but published out into a digital marketplace and then consumed often in ways that may not have been designed up front to provide a product or service to the customer. So now different entities will own different, say, sections of the customer experience, and those different sections are assembled in a variety of ways to complete a journey. So therefore, process orchestration becomes very important for the entity that is providing that seamless customer journey. Now, an example of that, so if we move to the next slide, please. So a good example of that is the complicated process of buying a car, which most of us are familiar with. The process of buying a car has numerous players in it. There's obviously the customer, but also a car dealer. In some cases, although as the industry moves into stage 3, even the dealer becomes more of a digital player. But a car dealer and the physical lot to put the inventory is another player. Banks and credit, particularly if car loans involved, are there, but regulators doing vehicle registration, and of course insurance companies. And if you purchased a car even recently, what you find is that there's some integration in that car buying journey, but there's still room to improve. And this is how a good example of how digital transformation is evolving. So for example, I recently was on Auto Trader, which is a used car, not picking on them or anything, but a used car site. And it's fantastic. It allows you to search and select a car, get all sorts of information about it, make sure that it's in stock, even get a quote from the dealer for what the price of that car would be. They also then support the car loan, and there's fairly decent integration between the car that you've selected and the loan that you're applying for. So you can get a quick quote on what the monthly lease cost or the monthly loan amount would be for the vehicle that you're purchasing. All well and good. But when it comes time to look at insurance, because as a car buyer, I'd like to know what the total cost of ownership is of the car. While there is a link to, in this case, comparethemarket.com, you have to, at that stage, the customer has to enter all the details of the car they want to insure back into the comparethemarket.com site. Or if you actually follow through and purchase the car and then decide to register the vehicle, again, you're back in a silo. So what will happen as the auto industry moves to a seamless customer journey is that the APIs, let's say, into the insurance site and APIs into vehicle registration will be added to Auto Trader's platform, enabling them to integrate those services to complete the car buying journey. And as they do that, Auto Trader becomes more competitive. In fact, the integration that they have today with the stock manager and the banks to provide the credit quotes is already providing competitive advantage for Auto Trader. But you can see where this is moving. The auto servicing is an interesting one because it kind of highlights another important consideration or concept for stage 3 digital transformation and APIs, and that is that the API itself really should be viewed as part of the product or service that a business is selling. So it becomes a key feature of the product. In the case of automobiles, it's will be, or even today, as important as as the engine or the tires, because the API enables you to integrate that automobile now into the overall, say, journeys related to owning a car. And of course, when you drive a car up into the workshop, they plug the car in using bespoke integrations, but more and more we'll see APIs into our vehicles that allow us to manage, monitor their use on our mobile phones, find them, and etc. And you all know stories about how that works. But the API, the point here is that the API itself becomes a key product feature, and that starts to change the view of APIs from a purely technical concept that might be built into software architecture to one that really needs to be considered as part of a business strategy and product strategy. So next slide, please. So good, yeah. So the bottom line is that the demand for improved customer experience and seamless journeys to the customer's outcome will drive businesses to stage 3. And to get there, to get to stage 3 of digital transformation, requires a more sophisticated use of APIs, API management, and particularly an approach that makes APIs a key element of your business strategy and product strategy. Okay, so I think next slide, and Chinti, Aisha, back over to you.
Okay, thanks for that, Clayton. Super interesting on the 3 stages, and we have a poll for our attendees at the moment to really understand where they are or where they believe they are in one of those 3 stages. So the poll question is, where do you think you are in your digital journey? Are you in stage 1, liberate the customer data, stage 2, platform integration, or stage 3, seamless customer journey? If we can have each of our attendees provide a response, we'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Giving everybody a few more seconds, and then we can take a look at the results. All right, let's maybe, if everybody's got their votes in, just a few more seconds and we'll close the poll. All right, shall we take a look at the results? Interesting. Ayesha, what are your thoughts on the poll? Is this sort of what's expected?
Thank you, Shinti. That certainly provides an interesting perspective from our listeners. So I think most of the folks have gone into platform integration at stage 2, which is also similar to what we have seen with other customers across the globe as well. And there are some who also have just the customer interfaces exposed at stage 1. And it's good to see that some folks from our listener panel have actually joined into stage 3, which is the hyperconnected world, and are also considering API strategy very seriously. That's good insight to come from our listeners today. And now I will talk you through our mantra in Mitra, which is based on the premise that all digital initiatives must be measured. So how do we then capture ROI, measure our returns from an API-led connectivity approach? What we like to call it at Mitra is, how do you ace your API strategy? Our teams at Mitra have developed the ACE model to capture the key outcomes and quantify a digital transformation project, irrespective of which stage you are in. Now, if you're moving into stage 3 and adopting your digital transformation API strategy towards a hyper-connected world and unified customer experience, then this following set of case studies that we will walk you through will prove interesting. So the 3 facets of a model in acing your strategy goes into adoption of APIs, connectivity of APIs between the things that we spoke of in terms of IoT or other devices and the people using them, and finally, the experience that these APIs can enhance for the user journey and the ecosystem as a whole. At this point, I'd like to share some of our key learnings from our engagements consulting, designing, supporting, and maintaining solutions for customers across various industries and geographies. Let's take a look at how we adopt an API-led solution. So in adoption, what was interesting to note is that only 8% of digital initiatives have shown returns in revenue from APIs. This number is from the 2018 State of API Integration Report, and it's a global report. Now, we've observed continued growth in API adoption across the globe, and the upcoming trends in API-led connectivity have showcased that 4,500 integrations were developed over 200,000 days. That's a lot of developer effort, and this is across 27 industries. What is more interesting is that this is the average from 400 businesses with revenues ranging from 100K to 25 billion. For a large enterprise, this investment and throughput of API interfaces and integrations are offset by the revenue coming from existing operations. For smaller organizations, this becomes even more challenging and too expensive. Hence, the number of 8% of businesses reporting return on investment from API programs. So how then do you foolproof your digital transformation strategy? How do you adopt APIs or microservices more and reduce time to market and developer effort, thereby reducing your investment and increasing your ROI? At Mitra, we've nailed this down into 3 key components in adopting an API-led connectivity approach. The first one being developer experience. Now, we're all familiar with user experience, and it is one of the top priorities for many consumer-facing companies. However, and moving forward, we need to create APIs with the developer experience in mind as well. Developer experience is the way developers feel during the use of an API. It is the accumulation of all experience developers have throughout the course of that API. It's typically not a main concern during the creation of a product aimed towards developers, but it is important, again, because we are seeing less return on investment when you don't make the right decision in choosing your API platforms. So the second thing we're talking about is API ops and API-led design. Both of these essentially increase your developer experience and reduce your time to market. To illustrate this, what I'd really like to do is walk you through a case study of an actual implementation that we have done at Mitra. So I'll give you a brief introduction to the customer and industry before diving into the challenges and then the key learnings derived in the context of APIs that I'd like to share with you. So this first one is about, I thought it'd be interesting to look at the telco industry. That's because there's 9.3 billion mobile connections globally, and the penetration rate of mobile devices is only growing. So I thought telecom would prove interesting for most of the folks here today, and it's very relevant in terms of the hyperconnected world. The ask was to drive financial inclusion using mobile technology for a large MNO in the eastern part of the globe. This was based on the financial inclusion goals set by the World Bank, and the customer required harnessing self-service and digital thinking across the user journey where possible. In the short term, that meant an ecosystem partnership-led growth. So C2B use cases, B2C use cases, and B2B use cases. The challenge that they faced essentially was how could they improve social economics with a mobile money solution that the MNO could then find scalable and resilient to a surge of user transactions and go to market amidst severe competition. So our solution came in the form of the MNO providing digital capabilities with reusable building blocks and connectors to facilitate faster agile API development. And what that really means goes back to the three facets of adopt in ACE, which is your developer experience, your API ops, and API design. Let me talk a little bit more about the API ops solution. This is a new breed of DevOps. API ops support developer-friendly and business-oriented APIs, and it's a movement, a practice, and a culture that emphasizes the communication and collaboration of your developers. In 2020, we see with our customer engagements that the movement of API ops will become more apparent, and it's a good investment to put into because in the long term, it increases your developer throughput and of course decreases your time to market. So to showcase the results we faced with this particular telecom, in 3 months, we deployed 200 APIs that provided mobile financial services for 5 million users with 300 million inbound traffic per day within the first week of going live. The API catered to more than 1,200 transactions per second. Most of this could not have been possible had we not put in the thought and strategy towards what API platform to choose, what was the strategy to improve the developer experience, and then also to focus a lot in terms of the API design as well. So we'll move on to our key learnings that we would like to share. With our experience of all the customers that we have catered to, our key learnings from this engagement and our adopt in acing your API strategy is to accelerate implementation and time to market by honing down your developer experience. And how do you do that? You choose the right middleware product, choose the right DevOps pipeline, and set your project up from the get-go with the right API strategy. At Mitra, we have amalgamated all of these learnings into the maturity model and the DevOps maturity model. The next thing when you go into an adoption-based solution is that you get your API billing and monetization right. Because as soon as you go into an ecosystem-based solution, then you move into monetization, and that monetization has to be split between all partners in your ecosystem. And this needs your APIs to be necessarily extended via microservices so that you can facilitate smoother onboarding. And we have been able to amalgamate this into intelligent billing microservices that's compatible with EKS and Kubernetes. All right. So I hope you listeners found that interesting. And now what I'd like to do is move on to the second facet of acing your digital strategy. So we'll now move on to connect. And in connect, what we're really thinking about is how you connect your APIs between partners in the ecosystem, and then the customers who belong to that partner ecosystem. Interestingly, 50% of all B2B collaboration take place already via API integrations. And I think this tallies back to the poll that we just conducted, where it was also 57% in stage 2, which is interesting to note. And majority of these businesses agree that at least a quarter of their user base will upgrade or renew their digital platforms if they offer integrations off the bat. So really, what's the secret sauce to connecting right? We spoke about 3 different stages. We spoke about adopt, and now we're speaking about connect. At Mitra, we've identified that into 3 areas into connecting right again. So businesses need APIs that are built to have flexibility and longevity to create a customer-centric and ecosystem-driven platform. The answer is to connect with an ecosystem and cross-industry convergence mindset, to incult API security design and API analytics from the get-go. How can we leverage the best of API trends and transformations to stay competitive and relevant? Again, to illustrate this, I'd like to run through another case study to showcase where we use these 3 facets in providing a solution to our customer. Now, the best example that I can think about across all industries that have really embraced ecosystem-driven platforms is open banking. And to explain that, what I think it means is that while platforms can change and scale quickly, the ecosystem supported by APIs must be able to adapt to this diverse pool of industries that are now being connected, and the diverse and varying form of requirements these different industries puts in when you open up your ecosystem. Trying to meet all potential requirements opens the door for different APIs to be bundled together. And this is something that we have noticed a lot of customers find difficult, how to bundle the right set of APIs and the right number of assets so that it can be reused for all these different industries that we are now partnering with. So at the industry itself, the PSD2 regulations provide the perfect example of this hyperconnected use case, where in this particular case study, I'm going to walk through the example of a large bank in Europe, which had over 200 branches, and their aspiration was to sell at least 40% of its major products online by 2020 by moving up the value chain. So in doing so, the API challenge that this customer had was how could they provide secure, standardized, monitorable, and controllable access while also ensuring high throughput, considering the number of connections that are suddenly available in an open ecosystem. So moving on to the solution that we envisioned when you're moving into a bank that adopts Open API, it was to provide an API platform that was already customized and fine-tuned to the presence of an ecosystem-driven platform. To talk through the benefits of this particular engagement, in 6 months, we deployed more than 500 APIs, supporting up to 1 million users within the first week of going to production. And this saw an inbound traffic growth of 12 to 15 million calls per day, with 1,000 and more transactions per second. In synthesizing this experience and the learnings from the connect stage of your ACE platform, we have our own all-in-one API analytics platform. And what this does is it allows you to review real-time alerts and notifications that will dynamically flex and downsize production resources to cater to the traffic and also ensure rapid user growth. All right, with that being said, Clayton, I know you have experience working with clients who are implementing open banking as well. What trends and challenges have you seen in this space?
Yes, thanks, Aisha. Yes, we do. And of course, recently have spent quite a bit of time with our banking clients on both PSD2 and the challenges and opportunities presented by open banking. But to drill into this a little bit more, I think there are 3 aspects of open banking that are a good analogy for any industry, but very interesting when it comes to open banking. I mean, the first is that the customer data that has historically been owned by a bank is valuable to the industry as a whole. It creates value, to economic value, to be able to access that data. In fact, the customer owns it, and the customer would like to do things with their financial data that they simply were not able to do, and it was locked behind the doors of a bank in the bank's back office system. So the first thing that's interesting is that in this case, a regulator has stepped in to say to drive digital transformation in financial services. We need to have a set of standardized APIs and other functionality across the industry. And that is a mega trend, has created a mega trend in banking that is transforming the way we will interact with the bank and the way we will use financial information. So while this is regulatory driven, and we probably won't see regulation driving digital transformation into stage 3 in most industries, what's interesting is that yes, there is a driver, and the driver is to create more economic value in the industry as a whole, and in doing that, open up new areas of competition, and particularly new products and services for the consumer. The second thing about open banking that we've been working closely with is an entity. It's called the Open Banking Implementation Entity, that was set up by the FSA. It was set up by the regulator to facilitate the banks and the financial services industry to move to this new way of working across an ecosystem connected by APIs. And that is also important in that the overall strategy and approach to move into stage 3, while it doesn't require that same close-in design of integrations that we saw in supply chain, and I'll get to that in a second, it does require a very thought-through strategy for how customers will interact with the various entities across this ecosystem in a customer journey. And the Open Banking Implementation Entity has been at pains, yes, first to define the standard APIs and how they will work, how each bank will publish their APIs, including the software development kits that come with the sandboxes to test them, but also extending into the customer experience. So wireframes that are recommended for how banks would, for example, authenticate a consumer and do identity management, or to approve a payment under to PSD2. And even those standard customer experience guidelines then help to support the adoption of APIs across the ecosystem. The other thing that's interesting about the OBIE and open banking is that the banks are publishing their APIs into the marketplace, into the digital marketplace, without knowing how they're going to be used. And that essentially is the point. So new businesses are being invented today that will make use of the APIs that are published by the high street banks to deliver new products and services to consumers. And that is creating the value and also delivering the improved service. That is a hallmark of stage 3, where the APIs are being published out onto the web within an ecosystem that is understood, but published out into the web for products and services that someone else is going to design. They're going to use the information from your APIs for some purpose that you don't know when building the API. That does point, and particularly in open banking, that points to the third thing, and that is around non-functional requirements. So the security and authentication is clear, and open banking is all about strong customer authentication, making sure that only you or the businesses that you approve have access to your financial data. But it goes beyond that, because the operation of an API and how that API is delivering the data becomes now a part of your service offering, and it must be performant. So if we pick on Barclays for a second, when Barclays has published their open banking APIs allowing any business around the world to access current account data of their customers, they have to be prepared for transaction volumes through their API gateway. And planning out scalable capacity to cope with the peaks and troughs of demand are another key part of open banking that is essential to a successful stage 3 strategy. Okay, Aisha, so I think back to you.
Yeah, and before you pick up, Ayesha, again, I would like to invite the webinar attendees to, if there are any questions, please put them in the question box, and we will have a little time allocated at the end to take those on. Oh, sorry, Ayesha, over to you.
Thank you, Shinti, and thank you, Clayton. I think, Clayton, you hit it right on the spot when you spoke about the non-functional requirements now forming an essential part of the experience. And as a business owner, when we now open up our APIs, we are now also responsible to ensure that they perform well and also can cater within the API itself inherent qualities such as availability, potential for it to essentially scale to much more users as it keeps getting pinged more frequently. And interestingly enough, that then takes us to the case of innovative solutions that we as a business don't see, but someone else can now design on top of the published interfaces from the bank. So now on that thread, I'll actually like to explore how we can improve the experience in the ACE model. So let's take a look at how to provide a unified experience within the context of this hyperconnected world when we're focusing so much between the connectivity between things and the people using them. So 64% of businesses reports offering customized integration with multiple customer touchpoints leads to more revenue and customer stickiness. With a forecast of 38 billion connected things by 2020, developing an API strategy that integrates with IoT and wearables is an entirely different ballgame. The answer is to develop AI APIs to ensure traceability of every trigger, transaction, and action, and the inherent capability for real-time message processing. Again, to illustrate this, let me walk you through a healthcare case study. And it's interesting how in banking, the regulation itself has forced an open ecosystem. But I'm sure if healthcare looks at a similar approach, now that we have distributed ledgers with blockchain and so on, that if vital information from the hospitals and our healthcare ecosystem is also exposed, we would have much better experience. And now I'll talk you through the use case of a startup story that we've created, but which has grown so successfully within the UK healthcare system. So in UK, the hospital stays and bed utilization, whether it be for surgeries or chronic care, has been increasingly high in terms of the number of incidents for patients, and the hospitals are overburdened. And the primary care providers for the aging population are probably individual caregivers and elders' homes. But what if we could help people stay active and independent for longer with an age tech system for older people and their supporters? So we wanted to tackle social isolation, promote well-being, and assist decision-making with better informed decisions about their care in conjunction with family, friends, and caregivers. So what this posed in the context of an open API ecosystem is how do you build an API platform that has inherent monitoring capabilities and real-time intelligence and analytics included within that API platform. Our solution came in the form of an API platform that was intelligent, enabled real-time messaging between IoT devices and consumer apps. The consumer apps could be mobile, wearable technology, sensor technology, and so on. So in doing so, what we identified is when you go into the concept of a hyper-connected world with devices and you adopt IoT, you need to really think about cloud AI-based APIs. This is an innovative solution that provides machine learning services and generation of custom-tailored models and hypotheses that you can then test with your users. The APIs using this technology bring unmatched scale and speed to businesses. We use these type of APIs for predictive analytics to combine location, network, big data, visual, and more to evolve and interact with users in a new and exciting way. For example, we were able to correlate the incidence of users forgetting to take their daily medication after a restless night of sleep for elders with dementia. Having APIs that deliver real-time data helped us to discover this trend and that we could appropriate the right responses faster. In this example, we were able to prompt the elderly or the caregiver with a medication reminder so that the right medical attention was provided at home. We were able to launch a trial release to an elders care home connecting 2,000 plus devices, including wearable technology that monitored blood pressure, heartbeat, sleep, motion sensors, and technologies at home as well, such as geofencing, where the monitoring devices were deployed within 3 months. This included multiple users in the trial or beta version of the release, where we were able to collect multiple sources of data coming through. So that's 1,000 users wearing wearable technology across all the homes, now giving you a constant stream of data that your APIs inherently need to know how to react to and find meaning out of the data that's being streamed into your system. So with that use case in place, what we were able to amalgamate in terms of learnings and how an API needs to be future-proof is that your APIs have to have real-time intelligence embedded at the API layer. And this can be done with an IoT stream. There are components like Kafka coming up that can actually process some of this. And then you also need to ensure, obviously, that these APIs are highly secure when the communication stream is coming through. So it goes both from the sensor devices back to the cloud API platform and then back to the home devices and the wearable technology as well. The final thing in going to a hyperconnected use case that we learned is that the monitoring and traceability needs to be an inherent API characteristic as well. So with that, I think we've really covered all three aspects of acing your digital adoption strategy. Chinti, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I hope our listeners took away some great learnings. We are ready for our second poll question. And in a minute, we will have that up. Your second poll question is, what are the pain points in your adoption of an API-led strategy? We have several possible answers. It could be the lack of design or poor reusability, lack of API-led strategy, difficulty in monitoring and governing API life cycles, lack of developer skills, or the need for DevOps maturity. We will give you a few seconds to put in your answers now. While we wait for the poll answers to come in, we've got one question, and I think, Clayton, this might be really good for you. What is the best approach, the listener asks, to move from stage 2 towards a hyper-connected world in a digital transformation journey? Would you like to take that question?
Sure. and maybe some views on what we're doing in that area. Both open banking, probably the prime example, but also we are doing some work in the auto industry in that area. I think you've got two things happening. One is that there is this gradual transition from stage 2 and stage 3, which is driven by the demand for improving a customer's experience. So where there are silos, that business demand will create the driver really to do the transition. The other, which is more of, let's say, an open banking approach, is where there's an external factor outside of just the demand to improve customer experience that is saying that for you to be successful as a business, you must participate in this ecosystem and open up your APIs to participate. See some of that also. That's kind of the supply chain approach, but that you see some of that happening too. I think as you move from an enterprise-only platform, so in other words, enterprise-specific set of APIs that are used to integrate multiple back office systems, all of which exist in the enterprise, or most of them do, and with a few maybe standard third-party systems integrated in. As you move from that to an open ecosystem where in stage 3, publishing APIs for third parties to consume, some of which you may never have met, yeah. You then move from the need to have a platform that is managing, say, the systems integration in stage 2, to a platform that includes API management or an API gateway, possibly process orchestration across or workflow across multiple third-party integrations. To play, I think, as a stage 3 company, you've got to have a very robust platform. Likely includes, as I said, an API gateway that allows you to monitor throughput traffic and do the other great things that API management tools like WSO2 can do for you, and then combine the various parties that you are engaging with in that digital ecosystem through process orchestration and robust workflow. So I think those things become important. One last thing that I'll hand back is that in stage 3, as I said, the API itself, the API strategy has to be part of your business strategy and product strategy. And I guess the way I see that is that the APIs that you're publishing now into the digital marketplace become a feature of the service that is being offered. And so the kind of data, the extent of the web services that are being published, all of that becomes part of your product. And so therefore, another thing about stage 3, in addition to the technology, is the fact that it should be integrated into the business and product strategy that you have as a business. Okay, Chinti?
Yeah, thank you. That was perfect, Clayton. We do have a few more questions coming in, but let's take a look at the poll results there. Wow, so very interesting. So 40% of our attendees feel that the adoption is poor because of lack of design and poor usability. 60% is a lack of API-led strategy. 20% equal for lack of developer skills and difficulty in monitoring, and obviously 40% for a need of DevOps maturity, which I think is what we sometimes hear. It's pretty consistent with what we hear and see from our clients as well. So we are ready to take on some questions at this point. So if you have any questions, let's please pull them in through that while we get some of those in. Let's take one more question. So one question, I guess, to Ayesha, to you, is what platform would we recommend for an API-led strategy?
That's a good question, and it's also very crucial when you decide your API-led connectivity approach in digital transformation. Now, of course, the market leaders in this space are Apigee, MuleSoft, and WSO2, which is also an open source platform. Each platform has their own strengths, and I think it also important to think about not just an API management product, but also to think about how do you enable the interactions and the backend system integration, as well as your ecosystem gateways, because your products essentially need to have the inherent capabilities, and we spoke about developer experience. Are there analytics embedded to these middleware platforms and connectivity platforms? Can they essentially cater to and grow to the IoT world? That's obviously going to come up as a meaningful use case for many of the businesses moving forward. I wouldn't say that we could recommend any one product. This has to go hand in hand with your current ecosystem. Each industry, we see different adoption of various platforms. And with that, I think it's also a good recommendation into some of our architects who have worked across multiple platforms and multiple ecosystems. So I'd like to invite all of you attendees and listeners today to really take advantage of your attendance today. We will be sending post-webinar an email which will give you a registration link to have a 1-hour deep dive session which will address questions like this and more. So you can talk to our architects and any industry experts that we have in place to your domain to assess your API-led strategy based on the ACE framework that we spoke about today. And we also have multiple maturity models to define how essentially you can move from each of your current stages so that you're well equipped to face the challenges of a hyper-connected world. So I invite most of you to be quick in your registrations. The first 10 users or listeners who do express their interest in registration, we will have a 1-hour session with one of our architects for you.
Thanks, Ayesha. We have just over 2 minutes left in our to take on a few more questions, perhaps. So let's get those in. We're picking through some of the interesting ones at the moment. Maybe this is another one for Ayesha. How quickly do you think a potential partner can integrate into the services?
Okay, I think that's another interesting and apt question. So in the banking industry and telco industry and healthcare that we spoke about, we spoke of trial launches for the healthcare within 3 months. The reason for a trial launch in an ecosystem partnership, which was in this case home care providers and elders' homes, it's important to think that before you go live to market, that the partner has a test bed, because this is about IoT sensors and streaming coming through. So in case of adoption of B2C cases that uses real-time streaming, I would say that the partners get onboarded earlier, but you don't go live mass production until you've done a test, because this also requires a lot of intelligence and hypothesis testing before you go live to the mass consumer market. But in the case of the open banking as well as the telco industries, where it's your main focus of your business and you're opening up your ecosystems, in the examples that we took today, for example, we were able to launch as quickly as 6 sprints in terms of deploying your APIs to the public. Open banking, we've seen typically that just setting up this platform and connecting up some of these devices can range anywhere between 3 months to 6 months, depending on the extent of backend systems, your API assets, and how ready your internal systems are to expose that as well. Chinti?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ayesha. So I think what we'll do right now is we've just 30 seconds to close. I'd like to thank you all for joining the webinar. Please note that this is one of a series of webinars that Mitra will be launching. So please watch out for your emails, do register. And when you do see a follow-on, be quick to register for the 1 hour assessment following our ACE framework. Once again, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have a great day.